He instructs me, as the one who will be your wife, to submit to your authority as you submit to Christ. Apart from Christ, I cannot love you, respect you, or honor you as I should. Naturally, I will focus on my own needs instead of yours. But with Christ, and by his grace, I vow to submit to your leadership.
If daddy ain't in charge, you living in a haunted house. Rebellion's as the sin of a witchcraft. A rebellious housewife, she ought to ride in here on a broom with a black hat on and a wart on her nose.
It's Katey from Without a Crystal Ball. Welcome back to my channel. Over the weekend, Jed Duggar and Katey Nakatsu got married. And during the wedding, she vowed to submit to his authority. And her pastor, the pastor, whose name is Noel, by the way, I was able to find this out, he told her that she was a delicate vase and Jed was Tupperware. And he needed to treat Katey delicately, which I completely and utterly reject.
We talked about men are kind of like the old plastic Tupperware 1 gallon. And the ladies are like the vase, the 1 gallon. Equal capacity vessels. We can treat one pretty rough. We can take you camping. We can change the oil in the car. It doesn't really matter. But with the vase, we give honor to the weaker vessel.
But it was in the vows that felt clinical. It felt very like there wasn't any love there. It felt like, why are we talking about obeying and authority and leadership and all of this at our wedding? Why are we not talking about, I'm going to love you, I'm going to be your companion, I'm going to be the best father I can be? It was really like, Katey, when Jed comes home, you have to obey him and you have to encourage him. And Jed, you need to be nice to your wife. And that's about it. It was not like anything love related. I felt really sad for Katey. And then I also felt sad knowing that her dad basically admitted to arranging the marriage. And then I started thinking about the wider issue with the IBLP and the IFB. So the Fundamentalist Baptists are this very extreme group of Baptists that basically believe that you need to take the Bible literally from cover to cover, and everything in the Bible is what it is, and you cannot deviate from the literal words of the Bible, even though some of the stories in the Bible are rather unbelievable, and also they ignore certain aspects in the Bible and only focus on others, mainly the woman's role, modern femininity, and whether or not someone can be in the LGBTQ without going to hell. I mean, that's literally all they care about most of the time, I swear. That's my belief. They ignore other things like not eating shellfish, mixed cloth, and that you could still technically be a polygamist, or that women wear veils in public. I mean, none of these people make their wives wear veils in public, nor are women allowed to talk in church. I mean, that's all in the Bible, but they ignore it. I started thinking about Katey, and I was like looking through all of her information, and I was like, where the heck did this happen? Because Katey grew up with parents she's a mom that's like totally normal. Her mom wears short shorts. Her mom has been married 3 times. Her mom has 2 kids from a previous marriage before she married Katey's dad, Corey. Her siblings that her mom had, one of her brothers, her only brother, is proudly out in the LGBTQ+, and he is a hairstylist in Los Angeles. Her mother is seemingly relatively normal and has a relatively normal life. So how the heck did Katey become so conservative? Well, it sounds like her dad had primary custody of her growing up, and through that primary custody, her dad ended up getting very conservative after he and his wife split. And then he married his next wife, Carrie. He actually pulled Katey out of school, and she was homeschooled. And so she didn't graduate high school. She was apparently very upset, according to blogs that he's written, about leaving the public school system. But it was in those formative years that he was able to convince her that it would be okay for him to literally pick the husband of hers, because he had convinced her that he could speak to God in some way and pray about it and find the right fit. Now, Jed could be the right fit for her, but we'll never really know, because Katey didn't have the ability to consent because Katey's brainwashed. And why is she brainwashed? Because her dad is also heavily a member of the IBLP. Now, the IBLP, the Institute of Basic Life Principles, which is owned by Bill Gothard, well, not anymore, but had been run and started by Bill Gothard, who was a pastor, who developed this whole seminar and 7 principles of being the best person and putting Christianity to a standard that literally no one can achieve, and basically makes parents feel like they need to do everything right. Women need to be subservient to men, and the fundamentals have really, in a lot of ways, come from the fundamentalist movement in Christianity. The fundamentalists basically believe that women should be rejecting feminism. They are supposed to be at home, completely obedient and subservient to their husband. The husbands should not and will not allow their wives to lead. The woman must submit all authority to her husband and not shy. And like, if she has issues, she must bring them to her husband before anyone else. And then if she needs help and he can't help her, maybe then she can go to outside counsel, like say her pastor. But in the patriarchal world of the fundamentalism, the woman basically becomes the property of her husband. And so the sad part of this wedding to me was this almost transactional situation that happened. Her dad, who has Katey, who is pure and has a high dowry of sorts, is effectively, in a way, selling her into a marriage with Jed, and then Jed and her become together. Now, that doesn't mean they don't like each other. That doesn't mean that the arrangement won't work in the long term, but it also means that Katey isn't coming from a fair spot. She's not coming from a place where she's had equal balance, and she's also not realizing how utterly brainwashed she has been. In fact, I was looking through the IBLP, and I noticed that at some point in time, she was actually part of this group called the Commit, which is a ministry through the IBLP that teaches girls that they must reject modern feminine standards and only seek biblical femininity, meaning women are to reject any idea of having any independence. They must become wives, mothers, and completely obedient to their husbands. They must become good housewives. Their only job is to take care of the home. And it teaches women how to be subservient and submissive. So she participated in that. I found photos of her in the Commit conference. And I also noticed that she has been a part of leading and instructing the kids ministry in the IBLP, effectively saying that Katey is deep into the IBLP principles, but the IBLP is also a wider subset of not just the IBLP as a whole, but also just the independent fundamentalist Baptists. The independent fundamentalist Baptists, who are not necessarily in the IBLP, still hold the same beliefs. And that's the problem here, is that when you get rid of the IBLP, say it's struggling financially, which I've heard it is, they've let go some of their maintenance people. They do mostly volunteers for all of the maintenance, getting like the grounds ready for like conferences. They have sold off a lot of the property that they do own, although it's still technically owned by people within the IBLP, but it's to avoid the legalities of all of the stuff that the organization has been covering up for years, because there's a likelihood that there could be more lawsuits or even arrests at some point in time, given the magnitude of everything that's come out in the last several years, specifically with Bill Gothard and 34 women accusing him of SA. I started looking back at some of the things that pastors say, and I realized that a lot of the pastors that are in the IBLP or the IFB, for that matter, are very sexist. And so girls not only are going to these conferences, but then they're also going back to church, and they're hearing these very repetitive things over and over and over by patriarchal men that are basically telling them that they have no place and deserve no place in society other than being at home. In fact, I was going onto this Twitter page, and it's called IFB Sermon Clips, which basically is someone that takes clips of pastors within the IFB and exposes them and calls out some of the hypocrisy of them in these sermons. So the account is actually oddly followed by Jeremy Velo, but that's neither here nor there. The account says things like this: Legalism is when you twist yourself into theological pretzels, explaining why you don't actually believe facial hair, colored dress shirts, and music with beats are sinful, while using those standards to describe those who don't believe like you as God-hating flub-ups. He also shares this account, I don't know if it's man or woman. Now, when you click on this page, then you can also, they have a small YouTube channel, but there was a bunch of clips from all these different pastors, and I spoke privately to this page. I don't know if it's a man or a woman, but they said they would be housing most of these sermon clips on YouTube because Twitter, they said, is unpredictable. They had posted a couple sermons from this pastor named Tony Hudson. And Tony is apparently a Baptist pastor who lives in Tennessee. So Tony Hudson is a pastor at Middle Tennessee Baptist Church. He's the son of Dr. Curtis Hudson, who published Sword on the Lord, which was a Fundy publication. And he is very sexist. He's very loud. He's a blowhard. He like screams and he rants at people and he's very rude. And I saw this clip on their YouTube of this clip of Tony in a recent sermon talking about women. And this is what he said.
Like the husband's not supposed to be the head of his home. Anything with two heads is a monster, friend. We got a lot of horror stories in these homes. Think you're going to a haunted house? Somebody help me. If daddy ain't in charge, you living in a haunted house, a demonic house. Rebellion's as the sin of a witchcraft. A rebellious housewife, she ought to ride in here on a broom with a black hat on and a wart on her nose. Amen, friend. Boy, you men are so henpecked. You men, you preachers won't even help me. You preachers scared to help me. Only reason I'm preaching is hard my wife ain't watching. Somebody say amen. She ain't spiritual enough to tune in. Somebody say amen. They watching Hallmark Channel. Amen. Y'all all right? Everybody okay? Continue that.
So Tony says that women are basically demons, and if a house is run by a woman, it's demonic, it's haunted, it's wicked. And this is a prominent, I would love to say that this is like a minor belief within the IBLP or the IFB, I'm sorry. This is a minor belief in the IFB, but it's not. It's common. It's super common for these pastors to get up on a Sunday morning and completely denigrate and degrade women and to talk about what they wear and to slut shame and to make women feel bad about who they are and to basically make it seem like women and all of our womanhood is our fault. Like every item of clothing that we wear, the fact that they have thoughts about us is our fault. Isn't that the most ridiculously stupid thing that you've heard? Yeah, me too. And I didn't realize that we were back in the 1950s. But then there's another by a gentleman named Bob Gray Sr., who basically like mocks women that are young that wear makeup, saying, you're naturally beautiful, you don't need to wear makeup. And then as quickly as he compliments a young woman and tells them that they shouldn't wear makeup, he degrades older women and says, put that paint on and cover up those cracks.
You look, you young ladies have a natural beauty. There's a natural beauty that you have, and I don't understand why you want to paint it up. My oldest daughter, Kimberly, came down the stairs when she turned 13, had 14-foot eyelashes on. I said, take it off, Tammy Faye. We don't need another Tammy Faye Jr. Take it off. Now, you old women, paint it up. Cover up the cracks, will ya? Every old barn needs a coat of paint every once in a while.
It's a world where women are degraded. They are told that anything that they wear can cause a man to have thoughts that are impure. And because of that, they should be wearing basically anything to cover up anything to only emphasize their face. It puts women in a position where if something happens to them, the men can find ways to blame them and say, well, you weren't doing something, it's your fault. And it puts an unequalness in a man and a woman, meaning that it's right for women to be put into situations that are not only in a DV capacity, but also in an SA capacity. And the Star Telegraph did an expose like 3 years ago that found like 184 IFB pastors that have been charged or had been alleged to have committed SA, along with all of these different churches that were passing the pastors around, covering up for them, and not reporting their offenses to police. Because they also don't trust authority, they don't trust the government, and they don't want anyone in their business. A lot of people say, well, why don't you cover the Catholics? Why don't you do this? Why don't you do that? Because I honestly believe that the independent fundamentalist Baptists, particularly the most extreme and particularly the most patriarchal and abuse and the most sexist and the most homophobic ones are some of the most dangerous people in the United States. They are literally every week going up on their pulpits and explaining away SA, supporting men that have SA'd children and their wives. They are proponents of a woman not being able to say no. They also shame and degrade women. They make women feel inferior, like they're not smart, that they're not worth it. And then they also hate anyone that isn't straight. And they consistently promote hate speech, which then you add in the fact that a lot of these people come from southern United States and they have access to a lot of arms, and you throw in their extreme beliefs, and it makes it a very dangerous situation because they're building an army of people because they want to overpopulate everyone so that they can effectively take over the world. So you have extremists that they're armed, they have a lot of kids, and they have a lot of beliefs, and they don't trust the government. It makes it a very dangerous place. It's not only dangerous for women, but it's also dangerous for children. So with that being said, knowing that there's pastors, and there's dozens of these pastors out there, I thought we could start introducing some of these to the channel and sort of talk through some of the worst so that you can understand why I'm so passionate about exposing this group of people. It's not just the Duggars that are the problem, it's the entire institution. It's the entire culture of independent fundamentalist Baptist extremists. Got it? Now, if you are an independent fundamentalist Baptist and you do not believe these things, this video is not about you. But if you have an open heart and an open mind, consider the fact that I'm not coming here to attack Christianity. I'm not coming here because I hate Christians. I hate anything that is covered under a veil of religion, used as a means to harm people, used as a means to control people, and used as a means to be completely and utterly deplorable. I don't hate any Christian that practices and doesn't hurt people, that is peaceful, that is kind, and I know there's so many of them. The problem is that the extremists are the most radical, and they're also the most likely to do something radical to our culture, which is why you need to talk about them. And when they don't like and they espouse things like conferences to make America straight again, or when they're out there and they're canvassing or soul winning, as they call it, and they're calling people that are in the LGBTQ slurs, it matters. When they're talking about women not having any sort of rights, it matters because we live in a free society, and when we live in a free society, we need to stand up against those people that are trying to hurt our society. So, blanket statement right off the bat, I don't hate Christians. I hate anything that's extremism, that is using their church to hurt people. And the IBLP, the IFB, and all of these pastors that we're going to talk about in the weeks coming up are hurting people. And we need to start thinking about why it is that we live in a society where we accept these kinds of things and what we can do to stop this from spreading any further. And to circle it back to Katey, she grew up with a mom who wasn't abnormal, who was not an extremist, and has a side of her family who is not extremists. But yet her father took her at a very significant part of her life, pulled her out of school. She told her father, "You ruined my life," or "You are going to ruin my life." And while she might be compliant and loving and say, "I'm going to be the most submissive wife," and she might seem happy, she was let down by her father. She was brainwashed by the IBLP, and the patriarchal IFB and these pastors have made her believe that she is not worth anything more than being a wife and like a housewife and having a lot of babies. And she has been somehow conditioned to believe it was okay for her father to do these things to her. Think about that. Katey's father, the IFB and the IBLP, destroyed her opportunities, and now she's stuck with a man, Jed, who is a deep believer in all of this, who you know is going to be an authoritarian, and who has already shown through his running of office that he cares very little about women. So, we're going to talk so much more about all of this, but tell me your thoughts about all of this in the comments below. Bye, guys.